Decades ago, Chicano power came alive in East LA. The events began on August 29, 1970. There was a massive street protest against the Vietnam War. Now, it began peacefully, but deteriorated into a riot and ended with the death of journalist Rubén Salazar. Salazar, who was covering the event, was struck in the head by a tear gas canister fired by sheriff's deputies. His death turned him into a symbol for Latino political consciousness. We look at the life and legacy of Rubén Salazar and the riot 30 years ago in tonight's People, Places, and Things.
Groups that had marched for 3 days from as far away as Long Beach, Venice, San Pedro, and Pomona arrived in Belvedere Park throughout the day. There were many women, many youths, and everywhere one could see families. Families that included elderly people and small children. It was truly a day of unity for the Mexican Americans of Los Angeles. The parents were there, but it was the young who showed the most feeling during the rally. People did disperse peacefully, but a group of youths moved to the nearby police station and began throwing rocks at the cars parked in the lots. There were angry arguments between the rock throwers and the moderates. And finally, there was fighting.
Kill the fatties! Just pushing that leg and fat too deep. If necessary, you can run across the
It is most important to see here that the fundamental right of every American to live in freedom has been defended.
Now, just a little bit more about Rubén Salazar. He was there covering that riot, that protest, as a columnist for the LA Times. And it was also unusual because he was also simultaneously news director for KMEX, a Spanish language station. He was unusual because he was a real professional, but he also had real roots in the Chicano community. He cared very much about them. He was raised in El Paso, went to college and journalism school, one of the first to graduate. He had experience both in Northern California before he came down to Los Angeles. So he was there at the riot, at the protest, and he was taking a break at the Silver Dollar Bar at the time when the actual killing happened. And the account goes something like this. Rubén Salazar was sitting on a stool about 6 feet from the door. Behind the deputy, meaning the sheriff's deputy, are two mothers screaming, "Don't shoot, please don't shoot." Before and during the Chicano Moratorium March, there were scores of undercover LA sheriff's deputies surveying the entire march and in constant communication with the sheriff's command. Some undercover agents were seen entering and leaving the Silver Dollar while Rubén Salazar was there. A coroner's panel ruled that Salazar's killing was a homicide, but Deputy Tom Wilson was never brought to trial. So that has raised issues about whether the killing of Salazar was intentional or not. Salazar was, as I mentioned, very involved in the Vietnam War. He was a correspondent at the war. And here's a clip from Salazar that when he was being interviewed by journalist Bob Navarro.
Traditionally, we have joined the armed forces of the United States. And by the way, many of us are quite grateful that I, for one, probably would never have gone to college if I had not been in the Army, thanks to the GI Bill. But the fact remains that we seem to lose more of our people in Vietnam in proportion to the rest of the population. And whatever the reason, I think it's very significant and I would say wrong.